I would like to now introduce our second speaker for this afternoon session. Fiona Tait is an elder mediator and family dispute resolution practitioner working with Relationships Australia, New South Wales' newly launched Let's Talk Elder Mediation and Support Service. Fiona's background is in research, working with vulnerable groups to include projects with the New South Wales Health and Ageing Research Unit. Fiona will be presenting an overview of Let's Talk, touching on elder abuse, the Ageing and Disability Commission, ways in which older people can protect their interests, and this she would be doing by way of case studies. So please welcome Fiona Tait.
Thank you very much. It's not just me, as you can see, I'm Fiona, and this is my colleague Sarah, who just introduced herself.
Hi there, I'm Sarah. I'm the Community Engagement and Marketing Officer for Relationships Australia as well.
Okay, so what we're going to do is just introduce the idea of our programme with a very short video, which hopefully will set the scene for the area we're working in.
I never thought we'd become one of those families.
It's my home. I don't want to move out.
My lawyer says I've got a strong case.
It's not about the money.
I don't trust her. I feel so alone.
Nobody listens to me.
I don't know what she does with all my money.
She's so forgetful these days.
They think I've lost my marbles.
They can't look after themselves anymore.
Why should it be my responsibility?
She thinks she knows what's best for everyone.
I've got my own life to sort out.
You'd be better off with someone else looking after them.
She's not putting me in a home.
I wish they'd stop fighting. I'm just trying to do what's best for everyone.
I can't even talk about it.
It's great to see so many people who are here on a Saturday afternoon. So we're just going to talk through Let's Talk, our elder mediation and support service. We were actually just launched in June this year, so we're fairly recent. And that video was just actually one of our promotional ones that's on our website, and we've actually had that translated into Arabic and Chinese as well to reach a larger section of the Australian population. So basically, Let's Talk is an elder mediation and support service. It's an innovative new service that is here to assist older Australians and their families and their networks to do several different things. So at Relationships Australia, we really pride ourselves in helping people build healthier relationships with whoever that important person is in their life. So Let's Talk is really going to focus on having those important and sometimes very difficult conversations. We also want to look and support people to plan for their future, which also includes finances, medical conditions, and living arrangements. And we also want to help people to address disagreements or disputes within their families, within their friendship groups, in the care of the older person. And we want to make decisions that protect the interests, the rights and the safety of their older person, their families and their wider networks. And Let's Talk is also being able to put other services in touch with Let's Talk, and the families, we can make referrals to other services as well. So Let's Talk is quite a wide service in terms of we can have individual meetings with people. We can have mediation facilitated family meetings, and like I mentioned before, we can make referrals to other services. So Let's Talk, we were very lucky to have funding from New South Wales Domestic and Family Violence Innovation Funding until June 2021 this year. So that's how far we've got our funding for. So Let's Talk is actually delivered by trained counsellors and mediators from Relationships Australia, New South Wales. There have been select counsellors and mediators have actually gone through elder services and elder abuse training to specifically work with this cohort of people. And we work very closely in partnership with, it was previously known as the New South Wales Elder Abuse Helpline and Resource Unit, which has now been recently rebranded last month, I think, to the Age and Disability Commission. So why do we have Let's Talk? So part of Let's Talk is we really want to mitigate and prevent elder abuse. So just put it into context, by 2031, around 20% of New South Wales population will be 65 plus, which whenever I read this, I was like, wow. We've also looked at recent estimates that suggest up to 10% of older people are affected by elder abuse. And when we include neglect, which is quite wide-reaching, this actually goes up to an estimate of 20%, which is quite a lot. Also, in Australia, just over a third of the violence or abuse towards older people is perpetrated by adult sons and adult daughters. And some of the core and many cases of elder abuse are very complex in terms with relationships and also other social and economic issues involved. So probably a lot of people have heard of elder abuse, some maybe not so much, but basically the World Health Organization has defined elder abuse as a single or repeated act or lack of appropriate action occurring within any relationship where there is an expectation of trust which causes harm or distress to an older person. So elder abuse comes in various forms, such as physical, sexual, financial, which is one of the biggest ones, neglect, which is one of the biggest ones, and also psychological. So that's kind of the context of what we're working in. So Fiona's just going to explain some of the risk factors that we're working with.
So I think probably most of you will be pretty familiar with abuse of older people, but just because we're familiar with it, it doesn't necessarily mean we react to it if we're seeing things over and over again. And there are risk factors which, the reason we were keen to come and see GPs and allied health workers is that you're at the front end of potentially seeing people who may be being abused. And because you see them regularly sometimes and over time, you can spot the differences. There are particular risk factors, obviously things like being socially isolated, being in poor physical health, frail, having a dementia or some kind of disability, having traumatic life effects. So if you have a family dysfunction in your family groups, often that leaves you very isolated and exposed. There are often a lack of appropriate services for people to reach out to, and they often don't know what services are available. There's often depression or drug or alcohol abuse that again gets in the way of people being able to cope on their own, and so they become at risk. Being from a non-English speaking background or from a CAL background also makes people more at risk because they don't know often where to go, and there are sometimes also cultural issues in terms of reporting. Obviously, if people are living in regional and remote areas, there are just not often as many services as there are in the city. In terms of perpetrators, often it's as was described before, the carer stress is a real issue. So sometimes family members, with the best will in the world, come forward to look after an older parent, but they actually lack the education to know exactly the best way to do that. Subsequently, they often feel burdened and resentful. They may be the only person in the family doing the care, and so if there are other siblings, it's a bit, you can suddenly get overburdened and think, why am I doing all of this? And you become resentful. Sometimes caregivers have their own issues. They may have mental health problems themselves, they may have substance abuse problems, and it's very hard, as the previous speaker was saying, to actually deal with somebody who is changing in front of you. So someone you love may be becoming a different person, or their illness may be incredibly distressing, and you may be having to do things for them that you never thought you'd have to do. And that can be distressing for you because you feel the distress of the person you're caring for. If there has been dysfunctional family relationships, that can really get in the way too. Sometimes a victim of abuse has to then care for their abuser, and that's very difficult. So if there has been a history of family violence, that can exacerbate problems. Sometimes if the person is actually financially or emotionally or relationally dependent on the person, so it may be an older adult moving back with a parent, and they need to be in the house because they can't go anywhere else. Also, sometimes gambling, addiction, and the personal financial hardship of the carer comes into play. It's kind of opportunistic. If you're looking after someone with some assets and you don't have any, there is a kind of opportunity to take advantage of that person. And again, history of drug and alcohol issues make it very difficult sometimes for carers to look after the older person, or if they're involved with an older person, they can also get in the way. So as Sarah was saying, financial and psychological abuse are the main players in this. These statistics are taken from the Elder Abuse, what was the Elder Abuse Helpline. So these are from calls coming in. So these are slightly different probably than prevalence records, but those are the calls they're getting. So again, why we wanted to talk to you is, and you may be again very aware of this, but there are barriers for people to report. Sometimes, as we say, they're dependent on the person who is abusing them. The most difficult one that we've found to deal with is that they love the person. They don't want to get the person into trouble. They don't want to actually affect their relationship with that person or make it any worse. And so they don't want any negative consequences to happen to the abuser. So they're kind of stuck, they're locked. Stigma and shame is also a big one, because older people have a different idea of what, they're not used to disclosing their own hurts, and so it's very difficult for them to come forward. They can fear retaliation to report as well. It's a dangerous situation to be in. If they're living with someone who's already abusing them, telling somebody else about it might put them at risk. Sometimes they just don't know what their options are, what their rights are. Being socially isolated, obviously, as we've said, means that they can't reach out to services. And sometimes they're prevented from reaching out by actually being locked in by the perpetrator. Their phone may be taken away, or access to a phone, access to other family members may be, withdrawn. If there has been the history of domestic and family violence, that's a barrier. As we said, cultural barriers, but also if they have, as the previous speaker said, an inability to actually communicate. So they may have some cognitive impairment. They can't actually tell you. They need you to look at them and get the idea of what's going on. There is a taboo nature about elder abuse. It's something we don't want to talk about. The idea of children hurting their own parents or taking advantage of them financially is not very nice, and it's not very nice to disclose. And so it's an issue we don't really want to talk about. I mean, we're talking about it more now than before, but it's an ugly sort of thing. It's unethical. And there's also always the fear of not being believed. So if people come forward and they're fobbed off, they mention it to someone who may know the person who's abusing them and say, well, I know them, and they would never do that kind of thing. They're such a lovely person. So that's a real problem. But professionals sometimes don't report either, even if they have suspicions. There is and you may have this, the Elder Abuse Toolkit. This is actually quite a good resource, and it's got the easy scale in there, which is an elder abuse suspicion index, and it's specifically designed for GPs, allied health workers. It's a very short thing, 5 questions, just to check in with an older person about what's going on for them. And it also has a little observational scale so that you can actually look for, is the person more distressed when they come in than they were before? Are they more dishevelled? Are they more forgetful? what's different about their presentation? Are they looking worse than they did before? Why might that be? Are they quieter? Are they avoiding eye contact? Do they seem very subdued? Lots of different things that you, as you would know the person over time, that you might think this is a bit different. There's something not right here. So professionals sometimes don't know what their organisational policies are around this. There is the interagency. So I keep grabbing bits of paper, but from the New South Wales government you can get these, which is how to prevent and what to do in responding to elder abuse. And that's the New South Wales interagency policy. Again, it sort of outlines what to do if you don't have a policy, but most organisations might have or should have, and it's useful to get to know what that is. Sometimes people aren't sure if it is abuse. It's, you know, what is abuse? At what level does it become abuse? You know, mum's lending money to her son. Is that abuse? You know, she's given him the car. Well, is that abuse? It's difficult to unravel. But if it's cumulative, often it is. There can be concerns about client confidentiality. They've told you something. Where do you take it? What do you do? There's no mandatory reporting of elder abuse. So where do you go with it? You now can talk to the Ageing and Disability Commission if you're concerned. So you can ring them, and they have got some powers, which I'll get to shortly. The client may not want to report the abuse. We've talked about that, and that's very common. There may be concerns that the services that are already in place may be affected or cancelled, and so that leaves them more at risk. You may have, as a practitioner, a close relationship not only with the victim but with the abuser, and that really makes life difficult. You may like them both. So there are often conflicting emotions, and it's a really distressing thing to have to deal with because it's very, very close to home. You know, we have all got parents, and we will all be older people, and so it's a very sort of kind of unpleasant sort of environment to be in when you realise something's happening and you're not quite sure what to do. And sometimes there's ageism. I mean, I spoke to a GP about one of our clients who was in his 90s, and the GP was very helpful and forthcoming, but he then said at the end, I wouldn't spend too much time on him, which, you know, and I thought that was rather sad. I mean, he was a difficult gentleman, you know, but I thought that was rather sad. So what do we do when people call us? Sometimes it's the older person themselves, sometimes it's a family member. So what we do is we basically assess the risk. Is this a crisis call? We're not a crisis service. If it is a crisis call, we refer people immediately to either the police or the commission to give them a call, and they can do some safety planning. So we assess the immediate safety, we provide support, we document and inform anyone that needs to be informed, and then we will respond and refer on. So the commission started in July. It has some powers of investigation. I won't go through all of this, it's all on their website. What we are hoping is there's going to be new police officers rolled out, especially trained in elder abuse. The hope is around sort of 55 to 60 police officers who work with the domestic violence officers, and they will be able to actually go into people's houses, and they'll be able to, they've got some evidentiary powers, and they will be able to check these things out. If there are reports that suggest serious abuse, the police will actually be able to go in there, and they will be able to prosecute effectively, I suppose, whether the older person wants it or not. So Let's Talk effectively provides a safe and structured environment for families to come together and have a chat about things that concern them. And we're I suppose, a softer space for those issues that aren't escalated up to the commission, but still where there's some concerns. So we can deal with future planning. I mean, those are quite nice family conversations to have, where we can get everybody in a room and the older person can talk about what they'd like to do. They can talk about who they'd like to be their powers of attorney, who they'd like to be their guardians, their advanced care directives, what they'd like to happen if they're incapacitated and need to go into some sort of nursing facility. But we also deal with knottier problems, which are intergenerational family conflicts that then affect the older person. We deal with family breakdown, so the older person can be isolated because siblings have had a fight and suddenly Granny and Grandpa don't get to see them and don't get to see the grandchildren. And families split apart. So we can bring those people together. We'll talk to them all. If it's appropriate, we'll bring them together. But we can also offer counselling support and things like that. Protections, obviously, and this will be discussed by the people, that people can do if they are able to organise themselves through My Aged Care, which is pretty difficult, and get an ACAT assessment done because they need some extra care. Just the fact that someone will be coming into the home is a protective factor. Obviously, having the right paperwork in place and assigning powers to the right members of the family or the right friends is important. And a lot of people don't think about it very carefully, and that's often why those powers can be abused. There's a lot of trust that goes on. And if those powers were spread out a little bit across different people, that people would be safer. Advanced care directives, again, will stop people, family members not knowing what your wishes are in terms of nursing care. Often people are very, very strongly against going to nursing homes and would rather have care in the home, but they haven't actually told anybody. Wills don't actually protect the older person, obviously, after they've died, but having said that, we do get a lot of people who are children of parents who are quite interested in the will and what's going to happen with the assets. And if older people are able to sit down with their families and explain why the wills are as they are, that can often lessen a lot of family conflict. So those sort of family discussions can be had, and we can organise that. Later on, if things start to go wrong, we would refer people to, legal assistance, public guardian and trustee if they want to revoke or challenge powers of attorney or guardianship if things are going wrong. And we also have referrals to financial services and, medical and relationship support if people need it. We refer back to the Age and Disability Commission, as I said, if we feel that people are really in crisis. And there are obviously the obvious crisis support services such as the police and hospitals. So we won't have time to do 3 case studies, but we were going to take you through one, which is a case that we've handled. The actual case study was taken from legal aid, but in fact we've done a number of cases that are almost identical, and that's the OMalley family.
Okay, so just moving on to our case study. So this case study will reveal some of the complexities of the work that we do within Let's Talk. Unfortunately, this situation, and I'm going to talk about the OMalley family, is not unusual, and elements of the story have been changed to de-identify and protect the family. So we have Joyce. Joyce is 72 years old. After Joyce's husband died, her daughter Deb and Deb's husband Rob suggested that Joyce sell her home and move in with them. Deb also has 2 younger daughters, and Joyce loves these granddaughters to bits. Basically, Rob and Deb said they would build a self-contained granny flat out the back for Joyce with the money she got from the sale of the house. And Deb promised Joyce that they would look after her for the rest of her life, which is not uncommon. This agreement was not put in writing, so there was no discussion between them about what would happen if this situation changed in the future. The granny flat was never built, but an area of the house was converted, giving Joyce a small bedroom and an ensuite and a very small sitting room. Things were going okay until Rob's business started to fail. He started to drink heavily, and he started to gamble, and unfortunately This created a bit of a downward spiral as he started treating Deb, his wife, Joyce's daughter, very badly. So the relationship between Joyce and Deb started to deteriorate. Joyce voiced some of her concerns about Rob to her daughter Deb. So when Rob and Deb asked Joyce for money to pay debts because of the failing business, Joyce refused. And in retaliation, Deb and Rob told Joyce to get out of the house. Later on from that, Deb denies that Joyce is owed any money for having contributed to the extension of the home which Joyce was in. She claims that the money was a gift from Joyce, and Joyce was trying to wreck her marriage. So essentially that left Joyce with not much choice, so she moved out to a friend's home, and she's actually currently house sitting, so she has no safe permanent place to live anymore. So we received a call from Joyce as she was desperate on the phone to repair her relationship with Deb. At this point, Deb was still sending her abusive text messages and demanding more money. Also in the background, Joyce was missing her granddaughters, which I previously mentioned, and she just wanted to know what some of her options were because she was at a dead end, I suppose. So Joyce felt that her daughter also needed some support, and Joyce wanted to provide some support for her daughter as the marriage was starting to break down and it was a stressful time in Deb's life. So taking that all into consideration, we met with Joyce, and Fiona actually did some mediation work with them, and she's going to tell you what the intervention actually looked like.
Okay, so Joyce is, as I say, we have a few people like Joyce who call us, and what I think is interesting about her is that she actually didn't really care about the money. It wasn't the money so much. She thought, well, I've probably lost the money. It was very stupid of me not to get it in writing. I should have looked at the plans and not just accepted that they were going to build me a granny flat, and that they were, and should have realised I was just going to be at the back of the house. And very, very generously, she kind of put it all down to experience. What she really, really was upset about was that Deb was her daughter. She realised she was struggling in a difficult marriage. She had 2 little children. Things were not going well for her and her husband financially, and now Joyce wasn't able to see them anymore or offer any kind of support. So she really was interested in how do I get this back? How do I get my relationship back? That's really what she wanted. She had blocked calls from Deb because they were abusive. So and that was making her feel very, very uncomfortable and stressed. So she just blocked the calls. But now she was as Sarah was saying, at a kind of an impasse. So what we do when people call is we have a chat. We basically try and find out what is the situation, what sort of supports have you got already. So Joyce had a brother, an older brother, and his wife who were quite supportive. So she did have people she could talk to. And then we work out, well, what have you got in place? She didn't have any legal advice, so we gave her a referral to some legal services she could talk to, just in case there was any chance of a recompense in terms of getting some of the money back, if she wanted to pursue that. We also gave her a referral to some free financial services, just to talk about how she could best protect what little assets she had left and her money, manage her money moving forward. She said how difficult things had been, and we asked her about things like power of attorney and guardianship, and Deb was her power of attorney and her guardian. So we talked to her about the risks of that, especially in Deb's situation, and gave her some information about going to the tribunal if she wanted to see if she could revoke those powers and put them in the hands of somebody different, like her older brother. And she was talking about her older brother and his son. And she had that option to do that. She was just given the information. We also talked to her a little bit more, and she was very teary and very upset, and she said that she was struggling herself with an older mother who was in a nursing home herself, who was 100, and she was finding that stressful as well. And so we were able to offer her, very near where she was, some counselling support. So our service is free, the mediation service is free, and we're also able to offer a reasonable amount of counselling support for people that need it. I mean, we try and cap it at around 6 sessions, but if people need more support and they can't afford it, we can give it to them, but we really try and, stabilise the situation with some counselling, and we can also offer counselling to other family members. So we then checked in with Joyce. We explained that there were options also in terms of her grandchildren, so that if Deb had really cut her off completely, I mean, there are under the Family Law Act things that she could pursue in terms of actually getting some contact with her grandchildren if it was important to her. At that time, Joyce was more concerned about her relationship with Deb and trying to reconcile. So she decided not to change powers of attorney, although she knows what to do if she wants to, because she felt that would exacerbate the situation at the moment. And when we checked in with her, she was feeling stronger, better in herself, having had some counselling, and is now talking about moving forward to perhaps get a mediated conversation with Deb, to invite her in to a mediation to talk about what they can do moving forward, whether there's any chance of a reconciliation, whether there's a chance that she could help her. What would happen if Deb decided to come into mediation? And at the moment, Joyce is still thinking about how we'd approach her. Would we send her a letter from us, or would Joyce prefer to give her a call and try and just do this herself? And again, it's up to Joyce to decide how she wants to do it. But if Deb was able to come in to talk to her mum, we would also then talk to Deb about supports for her and for Rob and for the children, to make sure that that unit is more secure, so that the stresses that in a way impacted on Joyce and could continue to impact on Joyce are lessened. So that's just one case study, and that's it's not super simple, but that was a reasonably simple one. That some presentations are really quite complex and take a lot of time with a lot of family members, and we just have to work around what we do and see what's most appropriate, whether our service is appropriate. We're constantly assessing to see if we are the right people to be talking to, and whether bringing people together is the right thing to do. We have to make sure that that's not going to put them at any more risk. So if we feel that, we'll refer on to different services. Okay. So we're just going to sort of finish up with the last...
Sure, I'm just going to wrap it up now. So basically, Let's Talk is available to any family members, any carers, any friends. The service is voluntary and confidential, and any agreements that are made during the mediation process are goodwill. However, if you want to make them legally binding, we can support you with steps to do that. Let's Talk is free, the initial consultation on the mediation. If, for example, you may need some individual therapy or some family therapy, there is a small fee to that, which will be discussed as you go through the process. So Let's Talk is also offered throughout different parts of Sydney. We operate out of the CBD, Blacktown, Penrith, Macquarie Park, and we also can provide a full service in Cantonese and Mandarin as well. And we also have some mediators that are trained in Bathurst, the far south coast, and the Riverina. And essentially, if you want to make some inquiries or get in touch with us, you can call our 1300 number. That's for Let's Talk and any other program that you want to make an appointment or make inquiries about for Relationship Australia. And we work closely with the translating and interpreting service. The number's up there as well. So that's essentially Let's Talk in a nutshell. We are open from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. If you want to give us a call for any inquiries, any general information, or you want to make an appointment and take things a bit further. So thank you very much. Any questions?
We probably have time for one question. So someone have a question?
Is consultation only on the phone or site visit as well?
That's a good question. Initially, when people call, it's obviously a call into us, and they'll speak to a family advisor who'll get some information, and give some referrals straight away. If we feel it might be appropriate to get a family together or to mediate, or we feel people really need some more support, we'll actually try to get them to come in, or we will go to them. So I've been going out I'm going to Minto next week to meet with a family member. Certainly if people are immobile, or there was a lady I was talking about going to see who was agoraphobic. She was an older lady and she'd been in the home for a long time. She had depression. She cancelled her first appointment, and I phoned her and said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "I just can't get out of the house." So I said, "It's okay, I can come to you." And then she phoned back and said, "I'll tell you what, I can come to your office, which is near my home, because I really think I have to get out of the house." So luckily she made it, and we met up in a place, a centre that was near her. But we do try and see people face to face if we can. And if we're doing a family mediation, it's really important for us to talk to all the participants and to get a real picture of what's going on, because sometimes there is high levels of conflict. And to be honest, sometimes people don't tell us exactly what's happening, and sometimes, what people are saying is not what other family members are saying. So it's for us to get a really good picture of what's going on. We do sometimes listen hard in that first conversation if it's an older person calling us for any signs of dementia. It's difficult, but certainly if people are very confused, or they can't remember the names of their children, or various sort of indicators that there's some level of confusion. Sometimes it's stress. Then we would talk to them, about things. We'd do some safety planning and also talk to them about, where they were in terms of their medical health before we started asking them to come in. So we do a bit of checking, but yes, we really like to see people face to face if we can. Yeah. I also should just say that we work very closely with the Ageing and Disability Commission. They refer to us. We refer to them. A lot. We work with seniors' rights as well, and legal aid. But seniors' rights has been very supportive. We also sometimes bring in. We've done mediations with Dementia Australia. So we've actually had a representative from Dementia Australia, who's a caseworker, working with someone to come in with the family and work with us, so they can give a big picture of what's going on, and then we can have a family discussion. So we really like to bring in people, advocates, support workers, family members, anyone who can actually add to the picture and give some support, because the most important thing for us is that the older person within this situation, that their wishes are understood and that their voice is heard, and that wherever possible, what they would like to do is what is being done. Okay.
Just to finish, during the break, if you want some information, we have abuse fact sheets, and we have a lot of other information that you can take away and keep in your centres if you want to make a referral and have just some information. So come visit us during the break at our table. It's bright blue, you can't miss it. So thank you.
And thank you very much. We're spectacular. Thank you.